I'm with you today in our project City as a Classroom, and I have prepared some questions for you, and we can start. Please tell us about the hypothetical Fab Tree Hub Eco Home design. What is the idea behind this project, and can it teach people?
Yeah, so the Fab Trehab home was started at MIT around 2002, 2003. And it was entered in a competition for Habitat for Humanity. And the thought is can we stop making homes out of an economy based on lumber production, where we go into forests and we knock down trees using a lot of energy, power tools, all kinds of heavy equipment that damages the environment. And then we take those bits of lumber and we bring them to a mill, which uses even more energy and processing power to reduce that dead wood into buildable units that get put on trucks that cost more energy, driven to a site to be assembled by lots of men with power tools to make some kind of a building. And then it only lasts for about 100 years. And all of that in the life cycle of how one creates a house, especially in the United States, is severely damaging to the environment. It creates an enormous amount of carbon loading in the atmosphere. So we thought, why should we kill trees, cut them down, and bring them elsewhere and make a home when we could use trees on site and grow other woody plant matter into shapes that would be usable for human programmatic needs, such as homes. And the concept here is that the house has no distinction between the home itself and the landscape, that it's a complete symbiotic relationship. It fits directly into the ecosystem, and it's a positive contribution model. So not only does it not cause any more damage, not only does it create no damage, so it's a zero impact model, but it actually helps clean the problems that are already in place. It helps scrub the air, create oxygen, and remove the bad bits that we've already created in the environment. Also provides biodiversity and other habitats for all kinds of other organisms that get to dwell on the outside of your home. And it lasts for hundreds of years. So the concept there is to rethink homes completely, to make them 100% living, which is an organic architecture very different than organic architecture in the past. Frank Lloyd Wright would say he was making organic buildings, but they weren't. They're made out of concrete, glass, and steel. And there's nothing organic about that, really. These are truly organic buildings. They're made out of living material that stays alive. So after about 15 years of research, we've seen many various examples appear across the world in smaller amounts and different methods, mostly with willows or sycamore or bamboo. Lots of living buildings you can find that way. We're doing one in New York City that we are growing probably by the end of the year. Unfortunately, I can't show you because of the intellectual property issues, but it's taken a long time to get to this research to finally make something that lives up to the promise we had with the original Fab Trehab project. It won't be perfect. There will be skeptics, but it's a very hard problem to get woody plants to grow in specific directions and make it into a home that's usable. So Terreform 1 has been making this home as garden for years. Since 2006, we've been thinking about it. So we're excited to release that project, expect it to be out there with lots of feedback on it. And it represents to us a new biological revolution in architecture.
What do you think at the prospects for the city car concept? Which ones have you already implemented?
So the city car was started at MIT. It was done under the work of my PhD advisor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. That was Bill Mitchell. And there was about 14 of us researchers thinking about the future of mobility and ideas about smart cities. uh, eventually, I think I did over 40 something car designs. I went on to take some of those designs into the work at Terreform 1 after I left MIT. One version of those cars was called the Heroku, and Will Lark was essentially behind that, and a few other colleagues that were there. And essentially that became a car that was something you could purchase. It was productized in the European Union. It was out for a few years. I think it was around 18,000 euros to buy the Heroku. And it's now been discontinued, but it was a car that stands up and spins on a dime. It moves in an orbital system, or it's omnidirectional. So it moves through cities with a newfound agility. And that was part of my dissertation, which was the entire 20th century had been designed around the automobile. It's now time to design cars that fit cities, not cities trying to fit around cars. That was the basic thesis. So this was a new technology that adapts to our existing cities, anticipates congestion, traffic, ideas of shared vehicle ownership like Uber or Via or Lyft, and then builds a kind of a collective organization of cars that move in herds or flocks of vehicles. So it was great to see one of our schemes designed, but the actual lexicon of ideas that we produced, I think those are even more important, because those represent a historical underpin for how we're going to move around cities in the future.
If you draw a parallel with the Tesla company, is there any rivalry or cooperation?
Well, for us, we're a nonprofit. So
Yeah.
Terreform is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're not out there to take over other companies. That's not our job. Our job is a think tank about the future of cities, especially around ideas of extinction for other species. If there's competitors out there, that would only be healthy because they're helping to innovate and push the science and push the design. So we're there for the intellectual pursuits and for the concepts, so that we could be the spearhead of society to help us fight for a better future. And we have some of the answers, but we expect others to also produce answers. And together we'll find a better solution by fighting over which is the kind of the best direction to move in. Other companies that might compete, like Tesla, I think that would be a good thing, because they're out there in the marketplace trying to test the constitution of ideas and put them into reality and see if they win out in the marketplace and if they operate in the real world. And I think that's a totally different kind of test. And Tesla is doing a great job. Tesla is probably, the #1 car company in the world, and it got there pretty quickly. And I think the others are behind. They're not catching up. And Tesla is not a car company so much as it's a battery company now, because it's all about power and the distribution of electrical power. And that's where the Elon Musk and his supercapacitors and his gigaplant has really anticipated the game that we're going to be in, which is swapping out batteries and the longer life of batteries beating out combustion engines everywhere. That's the real play. So anyone can make a body of a car, anyone. Not anyone can make batteries cost effective, last for 1,000 miles, and be really quick to recharge. So he's not quite there yet, but that's one of the major goals, and that's a game changer.
If we look at the city as a classroom, certainly in suburban areas conditions are different and might be less comfortable for people, which makes them more psychologically resilient. How different, in your opinion, perception of the world people who live in suburban place or urban place?
The resiliency of people when they think about what they learn in cities, if we treat cities as a learning environment and we compare them to the suburbs, what would be some of the differences? That might be easier. I mean, in general, suburbs don't have the sense of community, belonging, or togetherness that you would find in a city. In a typical suburb, and I'm talking mostly in the United States and in parts of Europe, there isn't that kind of connective glue. It's not a dense environment, and it's not an intense environment. There's just not enough exchange in a suburban condition. There's a very different kind of morphology than you would find in something like an urban environment. Urban environments, you confront people more often, you engage people more often, and therefore you learn about language, culture, ideas, new thoughts about economy, new business models. So it's a much different kind of, I would say, classroom-like environment than something like the suburb. Where a suburb, you would actually need to go to a place where people have ideas of learning or engaging in mind, or accidental areas in a suburb, such as a bowling alley or a church, becoming an area where people naturally congregate and may or may not have some sort of learning environment or classroom together. That's more of the suburban model. I think in cities, you learn as you go, because if you step out of line in a city, there's going to be someone there to point it out. And there's certainly many places in cities where you can engage. You can engage the government through protests. You can engage the government by voicing your opinion in committee meetings. You can engage at the university level, because in most cities there's more than one university. There's certainly many other types of schools, and there's many other opportunities to learn, like actual formal learning environments in cities, and you won't find that in the suburb. And just in even public transportation or parks. There's all kinds of event spaces where you get exposed to ideas of learning or engage the city as a classroom. I mean, you can go to Central Park and experience Shakespeare and just have either an impromptu Shakespeare moment or formally go and see the Shakespeare Theater and learn in that sense ideas about culture. So the opportunity to learn in cities and the free expression in American and European cities is overwhelmingly available. So I would think the access in urban environments is tremendous. It's just a great kind of mix, or what's the term, centrifugal force, or it's a centrifugal force. People are spinning and engaging like molecules bouncing and hitting one another. There's just a lot of kind of contact in cities versus the suburb.
If sociological surveys were conducted or forecasts were modeled, what kind of impact can these innovations have on psychological of people in cities?
In most cases, surveys are neutral. They're not active, and people wouldn't have access to them, so it would have no impact at all. The impact would mostly benefit the people who are researching it, either the government or a university. But if there's some kind of innovation involved, how would that affect the psychology of people, especially if the innovation is societally based. Jesus, sorry. My answer is, we are a part of the greatest social experiment in the history of mankind. Social networking across the board is an experiment that no one asked to be a part of. No one is in control of it, and no one understands where it's going. We do know that it has created an enormous amount of connection between peoples. There's been great moments such as the Arab Spring that we've seen. There's also been an enormous amount of detrimental kind of impact. Social networking in general as a sociological experiment on humankind, I think is starting to decimate democracies. If you can influence, even subtly influence, crowds of people to vote slightly different, democracy no longer works. It is a technology that is right now, I think, very scary. It's as if we've unleashed Pandora's box and we don't know how to control it. It's a kind of a dragon, and there is no authority that could actually, as we know now, fix it. So I would think that if you think of other governmental forms like communism could not exist in the Middle Ages. You needed radio, great telecommunication systems, and you needed fast-moving trains to even possibly organize masses and masses of millions and tens of millions of people. That technology enabled the possibility for communism to exist. And it thrives today with better technologies on some level. It's not a perfect form of government. Democracy did not require those technologies, but now we're seeing a technology that can disrupt it. So I think from a sociological perspective, I see that as our grand challenge of this decade, if not the next couple of decades, is how to solve for being democratic and allowing for people to have freedoms, and at the same time realizing that we have a technology that is not controllable, and those who do control it influence how we think as a collective peoples.
I look at your projects. They are unique. They are unique. Yeah, I would say as futuristic in many ways. How do you think they can affect the population?
Yeah, well, we do our best to think about massive population growth. We actually want to provoke people to enact legislation that would stop things like climate change or stop the extinction of all kinds of species on this planet Earth. I think that our main goal is to drive people to action through projects that make you think, that are slightly offbeat. Maybe they're futuristic, but they're not intended to be futuristic just for the sake of fantasy. They're intended to be futuristic to show us a better place, not a utopia, but a better way of life. And that we can do that in alignment with the Earth's needs and the amount of resources that we have, which are limited on this planet. So our approach and all our projects, they're about creating a narrative of the near future in great detail of what it would be like if you introduced a new technology that was green or ecological on some level, and how that would change life, possibly for the better. So that is our goal, is to make things, in a way as positive as possible, and to use things that are not, made of magic or fairy dust. They're actually off-the-shelf engineered concepts that have been around probably for decades. We just reposition them in a novel way, or show them being used or integrated in a new way, and let them kind of flourish on their own. So that's what we're thinking about. Sometimes we'll push the boundaries of technology when it comes to synthetic biology, but in most cases, really, we're just trying to create new compositions of things we know that are out there, that are already engineered, and allow others to mix and move them with existing systems, so we can have civilization 2.0 without crashing the Earth.
Back to the previous question, what scientific methods do you use to create these designs? How is the psychological component taken into account?
Well, the scientific methods we use is the precautionary principle. So we're not introducing anything that hasn't had some degree of testing or viability, or has a strong rationale for working at a larger scale with having no negative impact, or at least as much negative impact as possible. The psychological components, that's hard to tell, because we're not psychologists. We're architects, we're urban designers, we're planners, we're environmentalists. Our psychology, the psychological aspect is, for us, it's not controllable. It's not something we think about controlling. That's the thing about the field urban design. Urban design as a field, half of it you absolutely can author. You can completely control the drawings, the strategy, and the approach you have towards making a city. But the other part of, that's the design part. But the other part of urban design, which is the urban part, which is the capricious public, the leadership class, the whims of individuals, that's not controllable. So you can design the city, but how people behave in that city, is is never so clear. You can anticipate ideas of behaviors, and you can sort of mediate them to make sure that they're not violent, that they are protected, that they are considering air quality and issues of movement and access to water and public spaces. That doesn't mean you know how people are going to behave in public spaces, or what they might use the water for, or how they move around in traffic. That's a different kind of psychological behavior that, frankly, we're for us, we're very keen on letting people be as free and as open as possible. I don't have an interest in controlling people's behaviors, because it's not a good idea. Plus, I don't have the answers, and I wouldn't want that to happen. So, if anything, I would want to understand the existing behaviors of people, and that's what we do. We wonder why they're lazy. We wonder why that they're happy. We wonder why they're upset or angry. And so we'll design systems to fit that existing narrative. My favorite American is a made-up character. It's this guy, Homer Simpson, the cartoon. He's kind of fat. Actually, he's really fat, drinks a lot of beer, and he's not too smart. So we design projects for his psychology, meaning a typical American that cares more about sports or his job or what's going on with his kids doesn't have time to think about the city or classrooms as cities or engage the urban environment at all. So we try and get projects to the level where we get into his head, where we at least get Homer Simpson actively involved in the things that we're saying. So if we do anything on a psychological level, it's get people excited enough to at least listen or see it, to develop their own opinions and their own ideas about how they want to treat the spaces around them. So that's what we would do and then if their behavior changes because of that, fine. But we'll take one issue, something like garbage in cities. If we can let people know how much trash we produce in an American city, we hope that lets them think about their own psychological impact on what they do with waste in cities. But how they behave and how they actually control it, or that's up to them. We just want them to be aware. So I think there's a big difference between awareness and impacting psychological behavior.
What recommendation could you give to influential developers, co-designers, the current pandemic situation, which has significantly affected all spheres of life?
I would say that for developers, they should think about two things. One, the investment in the suburb is going to be very real. That rural conditions, ideas similar to Frank Lloyd Wright's Broadacre City, are becoming closer to a reality, from a technological one and an economic or financial one. People, because of this virus, do not want to live in small, confined spaces in dense urban environments. If anything, we've learned that that's a bad idea. So one of the reactions will be they're going to move out of the cities or to the edges of cities, the peri-urban condition. That will happen. A second thing is that when developers design their next project, I think they should be more generous with the amount of space, access to daylight, access to fresh air, open areas and park, etc. So I think that is a big concern that we're going to see from developers, is that we actually need things that are going to really provide a better quality of life. Because if the next virus hits, you don't want to be stuck in a small apartment with your entire family. You want to have multiple areas of refuge where you can either go to protected zones inside buildings, where you could share spaces with others without having to worry about spreading some biological disease, or have a larger apartment to begin with where you're much more comfortable with access to balconies or other transitions to outdoor environments that are just for you, that are either semi-private or private spaces where you have a relationship with nature, which doesn't exist in today's cities, not unless you're super wealthy. So we've got to change the game on the quality of life and the quality of housing, and certainly how we deal with market spaces, commercial spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Restaurants can't be in these confined little zones anymore, and also any areas for retail. So all of that, I think developers should now anticipate as being the future for how they design and build environments.
Let me ask you, which one of the city you like most of all? Maybe in Europe or USA?
Well, my favorite city is it's kind of a three-way tie. Well, maybe it's between New York and Barcelona. I absolutely love those two cities for very different reasons, but they are absolutely special to me. And then I would say Shanghai would be number three. It's just the future happened in China, and it happened in an enormous way. It is still based on a 20th century vision of a city, but it's done at such a scale with such powerful moves, with such an incredible economy and an incredible peoples. I am overly impressed with the culture, the cuisine, and the sophistication in the architecture. So Shanghai, I think, is right up there with New York and Barcelona. And of course, for romance, can't be Paris or Venice. Moscow has its appeal, definitely, and many other cities. I mean, I even like Mexico City just because of the sheer like vibrance of the environment. I mean, Mexico City is just, thriving with life. So it's really hard for me to I love, there's many cities. And I'll give a shout out to Montreal while I'm at it. Also beautiful.
Yes, I know. Maybe you want anything added?
Maybe I want what?
For this moment, my question is finished. Maybe you want anything added?
Oh, added.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that the current mission that we're working on at Terreform 1, I think is really crucial to us, especially how it affects cities. And our mission is designing against extinction. The reality is, since 1971 or 2, we have lost over 60% of every single species on this planet. That's every bird, mammal, insect, fish, coral has died forever. It's extinct, and that's well above the natural evolutionary extinction rate. We're never going to get these creatures back. And I think one of the biggest missions that we have, and probably one of the grandest challenges that humanity is facing right now, is to stop the destruction of wildlife habitat in our cities and outside of it. We have to build for increased biodiversity. We can't have these systems crash anymore. It just doesn't work. Every 7 minutes, we lose another species permanently on this planet. How is that not an emergency? When Australia was burning, we lost billions of animals, billions. It's unfathomable. We are in a web of life. Humans can't survive without other species around us, whether it's any flora or fauna. So, we can't lose plant life, and we certainly can't lose animal life. And that's crucial for us to figure out diseases, to figure out, new medicines, to figure out, just to make sure our air and our oceans and our temperature is preserved on this planet, because we're not capable of undoing the damage we've done. So if anything, I would say that my biggest mission is that call to arms to defend ourselves against to defend ourselves against development, against creatures that don't have a voice, that can't defend themselves. They don't speak. We just wipe them out, and there's no memory of them. So I think that's probably one of the biggest issues that worries me and our group. And there's a whole lot of other bad issues that are out there that need to be solved. Certainly the COVID-19 virus is a big one, but it's not going to matter if we survive the virus when life as we know it is extinguished on this planet. So 60% of all life is gone. Wow. Let's do everything we can to keep that 40% around and increase it, if anything. I know that sounds really dark. I'm just delivering the facts.